Frustration is a common trait amongst the families of murder victims whose cases have gone cold. Frustration is something you'll feel right along with me, dear listener, as you follow the twists and turns of this nearly 18-year-old unsolved case. In 2007, 19-year-old Brittany McGlone was found sexually assaulted and murdered in her boyfriend's bed. And despite good suspects and arrest, this case remains unsolved. Join me today as I talk with Brittany's sister Hope about her frustrating search for answers. Hello, and welcome to Box in the Basement podcast. I'm your host, Arlene.
And I'm Leah.
In 1996, my world was shattered when my uncle Leon Lorelas was shot execution style in a small town in Texas. To this day, his murder remains unsolved, and the pain of that injustice continues to haunt me, my family, and Leon's friends and coworkers. Here at Box in the Basement, we want to shed light on the overwhelming number of unsolved murders and disappearances here in Texas and beyond. We want to bring awareness to the lesser-known cases that got little to no attention, in hopes that someone listening will come forward with any information, because we strongly believe all lives matter. Ultimately, we want to get justice for Leon and for all the victims whose cases are sitting, collecting dust in a box in a basement. Please note that this episode contains depictions of violence that some people may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Happy New Year, my lovelies! We're back after a much-needed break, and we're ready to shed light on as many lesser-known unsolved cases as we possibly can. We are now also on YouTube, so look for us there at Box in the Basement Pod. Today's case is one that has touched me deeply. It breaks my heart that the family is still working so hard and tirelessly for justice. This was a hard one for me to get through, and is the reason it's taken us so long to complete. It's the case of Brittany McGlone.
2007 was the year social media really took off, with MySpace leading the way. Facebook was still relatively unknown, and Tumblr made its debut. The first iPhone went to the shelves, Netflix began streaming content online, and the first Tesla model hit the road. Severe drought in Australia drove up wheat prices around the world. A military junta in Burma, now known as Myanmar, cut the country off from the outside world, and 6 miners and 3 rescue workers were lost in a mine collapse in Utah. The Indianapolis Colts beat the Chicago Bears for the Super Bowl. The Anaheim Ducks beat the Ottawa Senators for the Stanley Cup. The Spurs beat the Cavs for the NBA championship, and the Boston Red Sox beat the Colorado Rockies in the World Series. Brittany McGlone loved hard rock, and the bands topping the rock charts the week of May 4th, 2007 were Linkin Park, Papa Roach, and the Plain White T's. Brittany's favorite band, Avenged Sevenfold, would release a new album in October of that year. I Heard That Song Before by Mary Higgins Clark was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, Disturbia ruled the box office, and American Idol was the number 1 TV show. Winnsboro, Texas is a small town in the northeastern part of the state that straddles 2 counties, Franklin and Wood, though our discussion today will mostly concern the Wood County Sheriff's Department, who has jurisdiction over this case. Winnsboro is about an hour and 45 minutes east of Dallas, an hour and a half west of Texarkana, and an hour north of Tyler, so it's pretty isolated. I live in dusty, arid West Texas where the landscape is dominated by mesquite trees and red dirt. East Texas, on the other hand, is lush and green, with hot, humid summers, mild winters, rolling hills, trees, rivers, and lakes. The population of Winsboro in 2007 was around 3,500 people, and it's a typical Texas small town. Small businesses, sprawling properties outside of town, that kind of thing.
Brittany Daniel McGlone was born on November 9th, 1987, to Ron McGlone and Patricia Tice in Quitman, Texas. She had a close relationship with her family, especially her sister Hope. That closeness was evident when we met up with Brittany's family and friends to commemorate the anniversary of her death last spring. Brittany and Hope had the same father, but different mothers, and both women were there on Wood County Courthouse steps, side by side, demanding justice. We spoke at length with Brittany's stepmother, whose anger and sadness was as fresh as it would have been in 2007. It is clear Brittany was special and so loved. Brittany graduated from Winsboro High School in 2006 with honors. She played trumpet in the marching band, and she was generally well-liked, known to be cheerful and positive. Here is Brittany's sister Hope describing her and their relationship.
My name's Hope. Brittany was my sister, half sister. We share the same father, different moms. She came to live with us in West Texas for a little bit I think they came when we were like four or five. They came to live with us for a while. Her and her brother, my other half brother. So she lived with us for a little bit when we were younger, and then kind of went back and forth between my dad and my mom, and then her mom. And her mom lived in East Texas. The blended family comes into play because now I'm close to her side of the family also. I would always kind of say that she was what brought like all these different families together, like had a reason for us to even know them or for them to know us. My mom knows how important Brittany was to me in my life and that relationship, and of course wanted us to have a relationship with each other.
So what is the age difference between you and Brittany?
3 years. She was born in 87, I was born in 90. So it's a 3-year difference. We talked on the phone every day, or once we got older and she moved back to East Texas and I was still in West Texas, we spoke on the phone pretty often. I did like 3-way calls with her, my friend here. So we were always on the phone a lot. And then MySpace was a thing too. So we had each other on MySpace. Before MySpace was a thing, probably like in 2003, 2004, we would email a lot. So like after she passed, I went back into my email because I've had this email account since like 2003 and found some old emails from back then and how we would talk and stuff. And it's kind of cheesy. That was the height of when technology was starting to become a thing. I'm thankful for it because since I lived on this part of Texas and she was over here, being able to connect, with phone or email or instant messaging, whatever. I'm super glad it was around that time when we had that, that allowed us to keep in contact.
And so what was she like growing up together?
Very funny, super goofy, like that's like the main thing. She was really ticklish and she had like a very particular laugh that we would kind of poke fun at. Me or all of our siblings are just goofy in nature anyway, but when we get together, like it was even worse. And we had like so many inside jokes, or like quoting movies was like the biggest thing. And yeah, back then when you didn't have like streaming services and stuff, you had to watch a DVD or however, Hastings, it was so good. She was very like strong-willed and independent and wanted to do things on her own. And when she started driving, like she wanted to learn to drive and wanted to make her own money. And she had 2 jobs when she passed away. Just very, very strong-willed. very strong
And
and
independent.
independent. She didn't want things to just like be given to her. We all kind of have that work ethic instilled in us to, work for what you need. So I think she took pride in what she had that she worked for and stuff.
Absolutely.
Just very, very loving person of the family, of us siblings. I remember one time, it was when my dad was living in Lubbock and she lived with him at the time. And we picked her up from a friend's house. And what I remember was this friend was like giving her a hard time about me and my brother being her siblings. Either they didn't believe it because we look more Hispanic, and I remember her getting mad and like yelling. I don't remember what was said, but I remember us sitting in the car and she was like yelling or kind of defending us and how we looked didn't matter. We were siblings and stuff, so she was really protective over all her siblings for sure. But really, really loved family. Like me and my dad have had tumultuous relationship, and I would tell her things that bothered me about him, and she was just like, yeah, that sucks, and it just never seemed to like bother her too much, and she still just loved, never seemed to hold a grudge. What I remember, never even seemed like bothered by too much, or maybe it was just that she didn't let things get to her, or didn't put too much weight in things. But she never seemed like she ever had like a bad day. It was like, for any memory I think of, I never remember her being sad or upset or angry or anything. It just always seemed like she was in such a good mood. Always. And I wish I could be like that.
She seems like a very special person, and I can't even imagine like what it's like to grow up with that person and then not have that anymore. But you were closer because you were sisters.
And the downside is that because we were so close in age, but because of our living situations and things like that, that I didn't get. I wish more times never going to be enough. But because I valued the times that we did spend together so much, that when she was taken, I felt really robbed of a chance to know her more and grow with her. But we kept in contact as much as we could. We talked about music a lot. I remember sitting in her room with different CDs and just she showed me a couple of albums, big part of our relationship too. I have like playlists of stuff that we listened to back then, and then I actually have 2 CDs that she burnt for me that I still have those of different songs that she put on there, and because that was like a thing then, like 2003, 4 is LimeWire, making your CDs, making your playlists for each other. I have 2 of them, and occasionally I'll go and like see what songs are on there. Sometimes I can remember a few that'll stick out that I can remember.
Who were her favorite artists?
Back then, around before she passed, she really liked Avenged Sevenfold. This is rock band. I remember her always talking about how cute they were and stuff. And we liked Linkin Park back then. Avril Lavigne that was when she was like at the top. And then she also liked country stuff too.
Oh.
My dad really liked country music, so she got that from him. But then she also liked the stuff we listened to, and that was like at the height of downloading music and MP3s, and it's so fun.
Because music does connect people, and then you have those memories every time you hear that song or whatever.
There's plenty of those that I have that I vividly remember. It was the second Linkin Park album. We watched the music video was on in her room. I remember watching the music video for one song. So like anytime that comes on, it's like immediately takes you back then, or even just seeing the album.
She was working 2 jobs.
She was working at the Lowe's distribution center at nights in Mount Vernon, and then was working at Alco in Winsboro, which is like a kind of like a very miniature version of Walmart, like just a all-purpose kind of store. The year, probably 2006 or so, me and my brother came down to Winsboro to visit, and she was working at Alco, and we didn't have anything to do, so she took us to work with her, but we would go walk around in the store for a little bit. We bought a basketball, and then we would go sit outside in her car for 8 hours waiting for her to get off work. And then her plans were to go to, from what I remember, she wanted to go to Baylor for nursing. So just kind of working to get to that point and doing what she could do.
And was she living on her own at that time?
No, she went back and forth between her mom and my dad. No, at the time she passed, she was living with her mom, I believe. So yeah, just kind of back and forth between the two.
Brittany was living at home in 2007 and was working 2 jobs, one at Lowe's Distribution in nearby Mount Vernon, Texas, and another job at Alco, a now defunct discount retail store in Winsboro. Brittany wanted to go to nursing school, and she was saving every penny from her job to make that happen. Brittany's manager at Alco introduced her to fellow employee Jeff Stogner, and the pair hit it off instantly. Brittany's mother, Patricia, didn't particularly care for Jeff, but Brittany seemed happy. The two dated for 6 months, broke up, then reconciled, much to Patricia's dismay. At just before 5 a.m. on May 4th, 2007, Brittany left Lowe's Distribution, where she was working overnight, and went to Jeff's house to sleep. Jeff lived with his family at the time. Jeff and his stepdad departed at around 9 that morning to pick up his grandmother at the airport in Dallas. And when they left Brittany, she was alive and sleeping in Jeff's bed, wearing a t-shirt and her underwear. Jeff claimed he had tried to reach Brittany throughout the day on her phone, but he couldn't make contact. He called Brittany's mother, Patricia, at around 2:30 p.m., asking if she knew where Brittany was since she wasn't answering her phone. Patricia was immediately alarmed and tried reaching out to Brittany herself, but the call went straight to voicemail. A short time later, Jeff Stogner and his stepdad returned home and found Brittany nude and beaten to death in Jeff's bed. Here is Hope again explaining a little bit more about the events that morning.
She was 19 when she passed. She got off of work from the Lowe's distribution center because she works overnights. And she got off and went to his place, which her mom had said that was kind of odd because she never just went straight to his place after work. She would go home and then like maybe sleep or whatever and then go. But they were heading out of town that morning, so I just kind of assumed he had discussed that with her that we were leaving out of town, come spend a couple hours. I don't know. So she went from work over there. They slept for a couple hours until he had to get up, and they were getting ready to head to Dallas. And then she stayed there to sleep, which her mom also said that was kind of weird because she never stayed at their house alone. Like anytime he would leave, like she would leave too. That's what I've wondered. We're seeing each other again, kind of
So they were on and
rekindling
off
thing.
again.
Yeah,
So, like they had gotten back together at this point.
I think they were.
Were trying.
Either Jeff's mother or his stepdad, we aren't really clear on the details here, called 911 at around 3:45 p.m., and Wood County Sheriff's deputies responded. Brittany was lying face up on Jeff's bed, and her clothing was piled on top of the boots she'd been wearing when she arrived. Her underwear was missing. An autopsy determined that she died of blunt force injury to the head, and she was also sexually assaulted. The murder weapon was nowhere to be found, and to this day, it's not known exactly what type of weapon was used to inflict the fatal injuries. Here's Hope again.
The investigator always told us, well, she was asleep. She didn't know. She woke up in heaven. That's what she'd always tell me. She woke up in heaven. She didn't know. I'm like, how do you know?
You don't know.
2, I've poured over the autopsy and Google, trying to make sense of it, and there was bruising here, there's bruising here,
Yeah.
different hit in different spots of her head. It doesn't seem like she was asleep and didn't wake up. Because if no one puts in a struggle, and if that's what you're doing, it's probably going to be concentrated in an area. No movement.
If she was startled, she would have been extremely
Ready to fight.
That was her.
And that's what I'm thinking too. Like, even if you're sleeping hard, if somebody comes and like gets on the bed with you or touches you, that's going to wake
Yeah.
you up,
Yes.
right? And so when you don't know, why is this person here? Your immediate, reaction would be like, get away or whatever. But it doesn't matter. You're just going to push them away.
Yeah.
So there had to be some kind of, even under her fingernails,
Yeah,
DNA.
she bit them so they were really really short, and that's something I questioned too. Like, did anyone swab her nails or whatnot? I don't know.
Where was the autopsy done?
In Dallas, the Southwest Institute of some forensics, some science.
So, at what point did you find out about any of this?
That evening, later that evening, because well, like I said, I lived in Lubbock area. It was a Friday. That was my sophomore year of high school, so it was a Friday.
So you're living with mom.
Yeah, I lived over there. After school, I was at my grandparents' house, and I remember I was sitting on the porch and eating some hot Cheetos. Me and Brittany talked pretty frequently on the phone, and I remember I was going to call her, and I was like, well, I'll do it later or something. And then my mom pulled up. My younger brother and his friend, I knew they were supposed to go see a movie. Well, my mom gets out of the car with them, and I'm like, I thought you were going to go see a movie. And mom walks by me and just looked. I perceived it back then as she was pissed, like we did something. But I was like, I didn't do anything. I kind of looked at my brother and I was like, are we in trouble? Like, I didn't know what we did. And he was like, I don't know. And then we went inside, and then I was just talking about it with my mom. I don't remember. My stepdad is the one who said that Brittany has passed, but at that point I didn't know how. And I don't even remember being told how she died. I just remember at some point I knew, but after learning that she passed, I vividly remember kind of feeling a disbelief, and then I remember running out the front door, out into the yard, and I called my friend at the time and told her. Then I remember crying, like kind of breaking down.
There were no immediate leads, but Jeff, being the boyfriend, was investigated early on. There was no sign of forced entry, none of Brittany's personal belongings outside of her underwear were missing, and nothing else in the house seemed to be disturbed. Add in the fact that Brittany's mom didn't like or trust Jeff, and there was some bad blood between Brittany and Jeff regarding their brief breakup, and it made sense for investigators to take a hard look at him. In our conversation, Hope brought up a few disturbing things about Jeff's behavior on the day of Brittany's murder. First, apparently Jeff and his stepdad stopped several times and took video on their drive to Dallas. Like we said earlier, the drive from Winsboro to Dallas isn't that long, an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes tops. And yet, according to video Jeff's family took during the trip, they stopped more than once. And the fact that they took video, that seems incredibly strange to me. But I'm not sure if I'm overthinking this and experiencing hindsight bias, or if the alarm bells are justified.
I could see if maybe you drank a gallon of water right before leaving and needed to stop and use the bathroom a couple of times. But to take video? To me, it's almost like they were setting up an alibi. Hey, look at us. We're filming at our pit stop at the Quick Trip for no reason. Here's my Cheetos. Jeff also lied to Hope's mother, Tricia, that morning, telling her that Brittany was sleeping hard and that's why she couldn't get her to answer the phone. By this time, Jeff had returned home and he knew Brittany was dead. On the surface, this could have been one of those moments where you're so shocked or surprised that you open your mouth and stupid falls out. Or it could be that Jeff knew more than he ever let on. Jeff's alibi shook out, though, and he was ruled out. Interestingly, though, Jeff has never spoken publicly about the events of that day or about Brittany's death, not even to clear his own name or to offer support for Brittany's family. I'm trying not to read too much into either of those things, but it's hard not to. considering the circumstances. It's also interesting to note that the official timeline investigators have used here is based solely on Jeff's interview. Jeff told investigators that he was expecting a friend to drop by the house at some point during the day to drop off some marijuana and collect money left for him under a statue on the front porch. Jeff said that there was nothing under the statue when he returned home from Dallas. I don't have any more information on Jeff's plug, or if he left any weed or took the money. But deputies apparently tracked down the plug and ruled him out as well. Brittany had a one-night stand with an individual during her and Jeff's brief breakup, and investigators took a look at him as well. This person also had a solid alibi and was working from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., the day that Brittany was killed. Brittany had mentioned to her sister Hope and an aunt shortly before her death that she was being harassed and stalked by her grandfather, James McGlone. Apparently, Brittany had informed her sister that James had been abusing her since she was a child. James lived very close to Jeff's house, very much within walking distance, practically within spitting distance. However, James McGlone also had a solid alibi on the day of the murder, as he was confirmed to be at work between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m.
And that brings us to Chad Carr. Chad was on law enforcement's radar from the start, but they could never get enough to arrest him. It was just a gut feeling at first. Chad was dating Jeff Stogner's sister, Velva, at the time of Brittany's murder, and he had access to Jeff's house. Chad had dropped by Jeff's house that morning of the murder to pick up a check, sometime between 8 and 8:30 a.m. But Jeff and his stepdad were still at home at this time. Chad Carr was a bad guy. He'd previously been convicted of burglary and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He'd spent time in prison for the aggravated assault charge. That attack was eerily similar to Brittany's. He'd struck a woman over the head with a jack handle. So obviously he was on the radar real quick. Police got a search warrant fairly quickly and went to Chad's residence. He lived with an aunt at the time. And they found 2 pairs of women's panties, a shirt and shorts with blood on them, and a ski mask. Chad claimed 1 pair of underwear belonged to his girlfriend, but he refused to say where he got the other pair. Police also didn't find anything that could be identified as the murder weapon. All they had was Chad being at Jeff's house that morning and presumably knowing that Brittany was there. An unidentified pair of women's underwear in Brittany's size, and an hour of unaccounted time in Chad's alibi. After leaving Jeff's house, Chad is seen on surveillance footage at the Alco discount store at around 9:20 a.m., and he showed up at an eye doctor appointment around 10:20 a.m. He was supposed to be there at 10, but he had called ahead to say he was running late. The hour between 9:20 and 10:20 would have been plenty of time to commit this crime, but law enforcement had nothing solid to tie him directly to the scene. Here's Hope again, speaking about Chad and some of the other circumstances relating to his going to Jeff's house to pick up that check that morning.
Chad, who's the person that was arrested, stopped by the house. He was supposed to pick up a check. Chad Carr is the one that got arrested for her murder. And he was dating Jeff's sister at the time. The sister was in high school, and he was like 25 at the time, 24, 25, something like that, and she was still in high school. Jeff was,
Brittany's age?
huh?
Was he Brittany's age?
I think he was a little bit older. He was out of school, so he's just working. I don't know what exactly.
Cause like
He was younger than Chad at the time, but older than Brittany. Chad was like 25 at the time.
so Chad was there too at the house?
Yeah, he showed up to the house that morning to pick up a check for Jeff's sister who he was dating. I had one conversation with Jeff like in 2010 where I was like, tell me everything about that day. And so his side of the story was that Chad had asked him if Brittany was going with them, and Jeff told him no. But I don't know if that was really said. So then Brittany stayed there. They were going to the Dallas area to pick up a grandmother or something like that. And my first thought when I asked him to tell me everything, and when he said, when Chad had come over, he asked if Brittany was gonna be there. I was like,
Why?
"Are you just saying that to take it off you? Or you're setting it up?" Jeff's family knew Chad's criminal background. They knew that he'd been to prison, that he'd beaten that other lady, hit her in the head. So, which this is just passing judgment at this point, but like he's asking if your girlfriend's gonna be alone, and you still decided to tell him yes and leave.
That why would he need to know that?
Again, that's just what Jeff's saying. So it's really it's hard to
There's a lot
take
of
that as a.
questions. Right.
So was this trip planned before, ahead of time?
Yeah, I believe so.
Chad knew that they were going out of town.
Oh, that I don't know. That I don't know. From the impression that I have, is supposed to get that check that day, according to Jeff, never went inside when he went to go pick up the check. Maybe that's when he knew that they were going out of town. I don't know if he had previous knowledge, other than when he showed up to the house and they were preparing to leave.
So when he got there, he probably saw they were going out of town,
Yeah.
and then that's when he asked, "Well, is Brittany going
Apparently.
with you?" So was there anybody else in the home at that time?
Jeff's mom was at work, who she also worked at Alco, and then the young kids that they had were in school at that point.
So Chad knew there was no one else in the home, so he could have come back as soon as they left.
I say that I don't know what to believe from the attorney general now at this point, but they said like there was no forced entry, but it was known for them to leave the back door unlocked. So yeah, whoever did it knew.
Did he have an alibi for that time?
Yeah, he lied about when they arrested him, and when we read the arrest warrant, when they asked him about his timeline where he was at that day, he said he'd gone to his job, talked to his boss about an incident at a certain time. His boss like discounted the time that he was early for dentist appointment. The dentist office said he was late. I mean, eye doctor.
All
His
of
whole
his
timeline is
wrong.
off. Yeah.
And they didn't think that was suspicious, you know?
Well, and pretty immediately after, he was picked out as the person of interest right away. It even started before then, because the officers noticed when they were already at the house, the crime scene, he showed back up, and one of the officers noticed that he was shaky and nervous. She noticed that he smelled like her soap that is in the shower at the house and commented on it. And she asked him, "Where the hell have you been all day?" And he never answered. So it was like pretty early on that he was a person
So it smells like the shampoo that they have there.
in their house.
It was noticeable enough to her.
Yeah.
And when you're with somebody, you know what type, the smell of shampoo or, hairspray or whatever that they use. So that's why it struck her. I mean, that was why it brought attention to it, because she was like, "That's my
The way it
shampoo."
was
or
acting,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
All of it was very suspicious to her. And she's a high school kid. Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Plus, he has a
yeah.
of violence.
Just even the nerve to just show back.
They-
I mean, that's part of his trying to fly under the
That's
radar.
part of, I think for him, it was probably more of an alibi
Yeah.
type thing.
Because if he didn't show up, it would have looked
Right.
even weirder. Like, where is this guy that's dating you and would probably be here?
Chad failed a polygraph test. But as any true crime fan knows, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Jeff's sister, Velva, who was underage, by the way, Chad was 25 at the time and Velva was still in high school, went to the crime scene with Chad later that day, which is strange in and of itself. Hope mentioned that the cops noticed how nervous and weird he was being, but Velva apparently noticed something too. In this case, it was just more fuel to the fire of suspicion that Chad was related to this crime. Chad would eventually be put in prison for an unrelated sexual assault charge in 2012 and was released in 2021. Chad was finally arrested for Brittany's murder in August of 2022, but the grand jury returned a no bill, which meant Chad was not going to be indicted. Unfortunately, That's where we sit today. Chad Carr is walking around free, and Brittany McGlone's family doesn't have any more answers. If you have any information that could help bring closure to this case and to Brittany's family, please contact the Wood County Sheriff's Office at 903-763-2201. We are excited to announce that we are now a part of the Darkcast Network. So if you like what you hear, please do us a favor and subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please share this episode so we can bring awareness to these lesser-known cases so we can reach more people in hopes that someone who may know something will come forward. This podcast has a bigger purpose than just providing information and entertainment. The Homicide Victims Families Rights Act is a bipartisan bill that was signed into law by Congress in 2021, and we want to see it put into action. This law establishes a systematic process for reviewing case files related to cold case murders. The focus is on providing a mechanism for the families and friends of murder victims to request a formal review of such cases. I'd also like to ask that you sign my petition for my Uncle Leon Laurelis' case to be reopened and reviewed with fresh eyes. And you can find our petition on change.org by searching for Leon Laurelis. That's Laurele. Thank you for joining us. Be kind. Later, Gators. We are excited to announce that we are now a part of the Darkcast Network. So if you like what you hear, please do us a favor and subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It would help so much so we can bring awareness to these lesser-known cases. Thank you for joining us. Be kind. Later, Gators. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast creators, host, and guest. Please follow and like our Facebook and Instagram pages for Box in the Basement and Justice for Leon Laurelis. If you like what you hear, please do us a favor and subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It would help so much, my lovelies. I'd also like to ask that you sign my petition for my Uncle Leon Laurelis' case to be reopened and reviewed with fresh eyes. And you can find our petition on change.org. I also have a GoFundMe page to hire an attorney to help me get a copy of his autopsy that I have been denied for 27 years. You can find the GoFundMe by searching for Leon Laurelis. That's Laureles. But to get his body exhumed, to search for evidence that was not collected the first time around. We and other families and friends need assistance with getting FOIA requests. It blows our minds that so many murders occurred from 1976 to 1997 in Brownwood, Texas, under the watch of the same investigators responsible for handling Leon's case. We're going to look at all the unsolved murders in Brownwood, and maybe even a few solved ones if it helps uncover what was happening in that era that left so many families devastated and a community living in fear. If you want to hear more about victim-focused, unsolved cases and get updates about what we know, also visit our website, justiceforleon.com. You can also join our email list to stay current on developments on Leon's case and other cases we cover as they happen. Please subscribe, like, and share our podcast so we can bring awareness to these lesser-known cases. Thank you for joining us. Be kind. Later, Gators.